Bernie Dragster, the Coca-Cola bottlers of Chicagoland, present the Mr. Chevrolet USA Super Dual Bike Car Showdown. From Pennsylvania, it's three-time national champion Jungle Jim Lieberman. From Dallas, Texas, Market and Martin's Drag-On Vega. From Alabama, the bold one, Bobby Wood. From New Jersey, Bruce Weston's fantastic USA 1.
Here it comes. So awesome. I love that.
Dude, it's not Wednesday until that officially flies by the 1,000-foot mark, right?
Yeah, that's right. When those things are digging in and just eating, I love it. I think it's awesome.
Man. Well, dude, now that you live in the Midwest, let's see, my wingman always used to be my dad to go to this stuff. He loved it just as much as I did, if not more. And when he passed away, dude, we should go hit these. Like, it would be not a weird thing that he would call me at 2 a.m. on a Saturday and be like, I'll be there in an hour, or 2 hours, and we're loading up and we're going to, just somewhere crazy. And you're like, what? Like the Hot Rod reunion when they first did that in 2003, 2002 or 3. I can't remember which one was the first one. I called him. I'm like, hey, I'm 4 hours away. I'm in Bowling Green. And he's like, what the hell are you doing there? And I said, he's like, it's the Buick Nationals. I said, no, it's this thing they called the Hot Rod Reunion. It's supposed to be like old school drag racing. He's like, say no more, right? And he literally got in the car and drove. Like, he had just got off work and drove all the way down there.
Wow.
But we used to do cool stuff like that and have fun and it's not an adventure unless you make it an adventure, right?
Exactly. And I love that spur of the moment thing because there's no plans, there's no nothing, you just go,
Yeah. Me and my buddy Chris used to do that. The guy that was he was helping me out with the AHRA for the first year. You met him out of Match Race Madness,
Yeah, I met him.
We used to do that stuff. I'd like wake up on a Saturday and be like, I'd wake him up like real early. He'd be like all hungover. Chris, let's go to Big Daddy Don Garland's Track Racing Museum. And he's like, what?
Okay.
Oh, sure. I got nothing to do this weekend.
Hey, do they have any heritage racing out here like they had in California? Like at Famoso, they would have the March Meet and they had the heritage. Do they have anything like that out here? Is there?
Yeah, they had that Hot Rod reunion in Bowling Green.
Oh, okay. So that's it because they have a Hot Rod reunion also.
That's the California Hot Rod reunion.
Oh.
That's the one that took off kind of, I think, after this Hot Rod reunion because it was so big. I don't know. It may have been one with a cart before the hearse. I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe I have that backwards. But, all right, well, let's get on to welcoming everyone.
Awesome.
It's Wednesday tonight. And it's April the 12th. Okay, so I see Slant Daily Garage is in here. What's up, suckers? Danny Boyd, let's see. And if you didn't get the thumbnail is the Fall Guy. I'm sorry. I looked for one that had the truck in it. This was actually originally the show release photo. And it's like, man, they should have had the truck in there. That was literally probably the biggest side star in the whole show, right?
Right.
Jonathan Couchy is here. Buff Del Campo, the man, the ultimate buff, Mr. Buff Del Campo. Nice. Fab Race Mod Repeat from Northeast Dragway, Mr. Chris Cox, otherwise known as Speed Oasis LLC. Ron English, A Cove is here. And let's see if we're getting caught up yet. Big Billy Racing made it. Good evening, Professor in Dallas. Yeah, and definitely I am not the professor for sure. So let's see. Junkyard D is here. Trying to see. Scarlett, the 4-Rod Cuda. 38 POS Racing. Colleen Tebow is here. Uncle Squirrel bringing us the squirrelness. And you said Colleen had a question about something, right?
Yeah,
she sent you an email?
Yeah, she sent me a here. I'm going to pull it right now.
All right. Well, I'll finish greeting everybody real quick then.
Go ahead.
All right. Kevin is here. Twisted Mopar Garage. Tom Brown. Let's see. Wanna Be. And what it looks like is I can't see what kind of picture it is in their thumbnail. Wanna Be. I'm assuming that's going to have to be a B body, but I'm not sure. That's what I would assume. Two Hacks Garage, driving and listening. Where are you headed, bud? Michael Roberts, Lout Burns, Greg McDonald, and Greg McDonald says, present here, sir.
Nice.
All righty. So, again, Wednesday night, Colleen Tebow's sent Shane a question, Professor P, and then we're going to dive into some tech on that.
Yeah, so she was talking about radii, and she was talking on the crankshaft. She says, obviously, she highlighted, we're going to do a John Wilburn here, So obviously, it is necessary to chamfer the bearings so they're as compatible with the new radii. And what they're talking about is whenever they cut or a performance crankshaft. When I worked at Crowder, we did this quite a bit. A factory crankshaft is going to have where it comes down and where the rod journal's at. It's going to be really a tight radius. And what they do, you'll develop cracks there over time with anything that's performance, like, over like say 500 horsepower or high RPM. You're going to develop cracks. So what they do is they make a big fillet, a big radius there. And so that way it cuts the stress risers. And because of that, you have to run a performance bearing, and they're going to be slightly narrower on that edge, and that's when they'll have, like, say, a top and a bottom. So when you get bearings, they'll say top, upper, and lower. There's a reason for that, because it's going to be slightly moved over for that radius, so you'll have a bigger gap on that one side. And you can really check it too if you just put the crank on there, put the crank in, and then bring the rod down, and just one half of it, you can look right on it on the crankshaft, and you'll see where the radius is and how far away it is, and the bearings will be slightly narrower. Yeah. I hope that helps.
Yeah, well, so we were talking about this right before the show kicked off.
Yeah,
and like the whole purpose of that large radii on there is that, and like Shane was saying, for high performance stuff, but it's not tapered. Like if you look at a regular crankshaft, it's an immediate cut. I mean, it's like literally a 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where the stress risers happen, right? And so what they do is they make that trailing edge, or the leading edge of that cut, a little bit fatter, so it tapers off and it has less possibility of stress risers there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you get a performance bearing, it should have it in it already. Anything that's going to be a P series or an H series bearing will definitely already be set up for that. So in a Chrysler, I think the mains I run are 1266, I believe. So they're full grooves. And I can't remember the number of the bearing, but I always run an H series on the bearings. They're a little harder. They're usually black. Just run a little extra gap on them because they're usually coated. So
I remember the first time I seen those things, man.
Yeah.
That was like early 2000s, and I had ordered bearings. I'm like, man, these bearings are pretty cheap these days, right? And I got one bearing in the mail, right? And I'm like, what the hell? I ordered a set of bearings, and it was literally like one bearing for one rod. Right? And I'm like, what the hell? And then I opened it up and they're black. And I'm like, I have never seen this before. And it was just by accident that I ordered them. I ordered them literally just by reading the specs. And I'm like, oh man, those would be pretty cool bearings. And I was thinking they're a set of bearings and they're smaller. So maybe that's why they cost less. Right? And then I got the bearing. And I'm like, what the hell? This one bearing. Yeah. This one bearing costs as much as almost as much as a regular set.
yeah.
And then when I put them on, it was like I'd never seen black bearings before, ever in my life, right? And let's see, that was a 302 Ford that I ended up cracking the block up through the mains and the cam webbing. And when I took the intake manifold, it started leaking water out of the timing cover, right?
Oh, wow.
And it's still running. I was racing it at the track. I was running it, and it was leaking water. So all I do was I ran the cap loose, right? And I'd half fill the motor. And I'm like, you just got to start it up and run it down the track. I mean, there's no point in tearing the whole dang thing apart in the middle of the season to change the timing cover gasket, right? And that's what I was thinking it was. So I waited till the end of the season, and I was hammering on a couple hundred shots of nitrous. And then at the end of the season, I pulled it out. I'm like, I'll just freshen it up. And I pulled the timing cover off, and then when I pulled the intake manifold off, the whole damn thing fell open like a banana, right? I'd never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap, but it didn't spin the bearings.
Wow.
It never spun them. And what was neat is they all got wet because they got hot. If you've never, and Shane, you've seen it thousands of times, I'm sure, when a bearing gets hot, what happens is it loses its tempering generally. And the easy way to tell is if you have a motor on a stand and you turn it upside down and you're going to take the rods or the mains off. What I do is I just run through them. I got a small machinist hammer and I'll tap every single rod, right? And you'll get to the one that's not right, and it will not sound right. It sounds completely different than the rest of them.
Yep.
Okay, and that's the one where the bearing is essentially has gotten hot, and as soon as you take that cap loose, that bearing will literally fall out.
It'll pop right out because it lost its temper. It just ping goes out like that.
Usually, what happens if it still had oil in it, it'll stick to the crank. Just that hydraulic wedge that you normally rely on for it working will suck it right out of the bearing cap and stick it to the crank, and you'll have a hard time getting it off the crank because there's nothing holding it, right?
Yeah.
But then when you take the other side of the rod and you push it down, the other side of the bearing will do the same. It'll stick to the crank. Mm-hmm. And but the easy way to tell, just tap them with a small machinist hammer, and it'll sound hollow. It sounds hollow compared to the rest.
Yeah, but Colleen, if you're just running, if it's bearings, just get a P series bearing. They should have the correct radius or dimension on there for that bigger fillet. So I wouldn't worry about it. But you can check it. It's a really simple check just by an eyeball.
So Ron English is, how do Dallas? Hope the days have been kind to you. They've been all right. I've just been busy. This is generally the worst part of the year for me because you get the season kicked off. I'm already behind on the rule book because I ended up spending 2 months sick with diabetic medicine side effects, and then I pick up a couple of side jobs before the business or before the AHRA business gets real hot and heavy where I'm gone every weekend. Yep. So just been kind of jumping through my own butt. Plus this month has just been worse because I've been trying to get my white Ford truck ready to go, and I got all my stuff to un-EFI it, right?
Nice.
Un-EFI it. We're gonna find out what happens. And I ported the intake man. Well, I didn't just port it. I told you it was neck down. Like you're an adapter for a quadrijet.
It comes down to us. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was this, but it was cast into the intake manifold like that, and I unnecked it. And I mean, I took serious metal out of this thing. Serious. And now it looks like a freaking race piece, and I'm kind of wondering if it's going to end up making tons of horsepower on no torque. I'm kind of worried. But
I'm actually at the same point too with the Slant 6. Tomorrow we find out if the fuel injection is worth it compared to a carburetor.
Well, I think, to tell you the truth, the ease and simplicity of the carburetor is already going to have the EFI beat hands down.
100%.
Here's the thing that I know. When I put something together, I generally understand what it's going to do. Mm-hmm. The EFI, you can put it all together, but the damn thing's changing itself. As you drive down the road, it's changing the pulse width, it's changing the, not necessarily the fuel pressure, but essentially the pulse width, and then that leads to a couple of things. The more fuel you add, the cooler the engine will run, right? Which your temperature, it's always reading the engine coolant temperature sensor, allowing it to change, varying on that. So there's literally a mechanic under your hood as you're driving it. Carburetor, I'll tell you, you can feel what's wrong with it, and then 5 miles down the road, that's still the case. Yeah. Right?
But I'm still not done with fuel injection. This is just a throttle body fuel injection, and I'm going to do the multi-point fuel injection eventually. But I'm going to probably, if this doesn't work, I'm going to put a carburetor back on it because it's just easy for me. I know what to do.
Yeah. No, I don't. That's why I'm going this way. I'm tired of fighting that EFI, and it's too old and archaic, and I've thrown too many chips at it, and it's eating enough money up that it's time to just move on, cut my losses, and move. Yeah. So Jonathan Couch is saying, has anybody ever ran Crazy Head's intake cam on a motor that was close to 8.5, 9-1? Yeah, I ran pretty good stuff on 9-1 302 Fords. They get really soggy on the bottom end, but man, 2,500 RPM is like the magic number. That's where that thing grows into being the Jack the Giant killer.
Yeah. Nothing really that 9-1 is about the smallest I've ever done, lowest. That thing made about, I think it was like 400 horsepower. I did a 360 and it was fun. It was a fun street car.
He also says for a 400 horsepower motor, the difference is 12 horsepower. I feel that the head flow is more important in that 8 to 9.5 to 1 ratio, that compression, but 10.5 is optimal. So here's what I do know. If you run that low a compression ratio, and yes, you're probably only giving up 12, 15 horsepower, somewhere around there, but it will run on 87 octane gas, and it'll actually make more power in the 87 octane gas than it would at, say, 93. Because the fuel will burn faster and hotter. So
when my Dart was my daily driver, that's what I had, is 9 to 1 360, and I could put 87 in it and it was fine.
That's cool. I do like that.
Yeah, it was nice.
The only thing is like generally when they're 8 to 1, if it's not the right combo, it is just such an anemic turd. It loses all that torque. Yeah. 12 horsepower and 100 foot-pounds of torque.
Right. It seems like it's probably more like 30 or 40, and it's across the board too. It's the whole torque curve.
It's just further down. The torque curve looks the same. It's just further down. It's like, oh, what a turd. But they do really come to life. Once you get them wound up and the camshaft gets into its power band, that's if you really want to test one of those and see what the difference of the camshaft is. Those are the ones you can, the low compression, big camshaft is where you can really feel that camshaft work. You could almost set your watch by them.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Junkyard D says, happy hump day. Jonathan Couchy was saying, I was looking up combinations for small block Mopars to get in the 12s. Most guys were running 10 to 1, but then there was one at 9 to 1, 9.5 to 1, and they had crazy good heads. So the rule of thumb used to be buy the best head that you can afford and then just slide a short block under it, whatever you got to do.
Buy the best heads and build the engine around it. I had W2 heads on a 360, and it was 9 to 1. And the car would run like in the mid 12s. It was easy because I had really good flow. It flowed like 310 CFM, which was unheard of, back in the early 2000s, late 90s. So they were I think they were W2 Econos, and they were just insanely good heads.
Well, and that was the time frame where that was like a famous combo. Right, because people were actually still driving muscle cars and stuff on the street. And the Mustang 5-liter was kind of in its own, and everybody was pretty much running an 87 to 91 friendly combo, all over the street. But some of them were heavy hitters. You'd have like small blocks doing about 420 horse, which is, man, that's a freaking good number for 8.5, 9 to 1 compression. That's saying a lot.
Back in those days, if you're running 13 or 12 seconds on the street, you were king of the street. If you could get that thing to hook up on, because there was really no, I used dirt track tires back then because there was really no drag radials.
Quick times.
Exactly. And that was a hot combination. You ran a 12, you were just untouchable on the street. Really, there was very few people that would beat you.
Yeah, I was cheap, man. I didn't have the money for quick times.
No, I'd just go to the track. I'd go to the circle track and I'd buy takeoffs.
Oh, used ones?
Yeah, I'd buy used ones.
I was going to say, there's a cheap way to do that. You remember how McCreary used to sell recap stuff? Mm-hmm. Right? Well, they didn't do that in the 90s. The big ticket back then was the BF Goodriches and the Eagle GTs, stuff like that. And you used to be able to get those for a reasonable price on the used tire rack. I don't even know if they make a used tire rack anymore, if they have a used tire rack at tire stores. But we used to get those, and what you'd do is you'd soak them in VHT. You'd buy like a 1 gallon can of VHT.
Just put it on towels and lay it around.
Yes, and you'd soak them. And then here's the thing, like the tire gets soft and very pliable, and it hook up pretty good. Man, don't drive that sucker around the block too much because it will have no tire.
Your chunks will come off.
Yeah, it will fall apart fast. It did not like corners, especially.
No.
Let's see. Dakota's timeout says, I put Dart 215 heads on a 350. Performer RPM intake 1 3/4 headers. I don't know what cam. It ran good. Yeah. The head is
everything.
It's 100%. It's
air in, air out. These are just air pumps. It doesn't matter whose it is. It's just air in, air out. And all the camshaft does is tell the engine at what time to run to make its power. That's all it does. But the head makes the power.
Okay, so the way I look at everything is just like Shane's saying that it's air in, air out, and it doesn't matter about the intake manifold. It doesn't matter about the exhaust manifold, the header, the camshaft. All of that stuff is an addition to, right? Mm-hmm. It makes the whole combination together work well. But if you take, let's say you took just a stock short block and you put the best head you could buy with a stock intake manifold and a stock exhaust manifold, your limiting factor on that engine is actually going to be that, and you ran the factory camshaft. The limiting factor on that engine is going to be that intake manifold. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's only going to make as much power as that intake manifold is going to allow it, but it's probably going to make 100 more horsepower than the factory setup was.
Yeah,
right. It gets very interesting when you throw factory stuff on really good heads, and that's why I always liked the ringers on the street, right? Mm-hmm. The rope-a-dopes, the hustle machines. Yeah. Those things were bitching because that's exactly what they were. And you'd have really high compression, really good heads, and a set of factory Rams Horton exhaust manifolds that were ported to death on the inside. And it looked like a freaking stock motor with a set of Edelbrock valve covers on it.
Yeah.
And they'd run. And that's where you get suckered into doing some street racing. And this thing would put a freaking bus length on you by the time you get to the 60-foot mark.
You know, in 2003, when they came out, the Chrysler came out with those 4-inch stroke cranks for the 360s, I bought one of the cast ones because they were cheap. They were like $300 back then. Uh-huh. And I bought one. I bought the rods and the pistons. It was like a kit. It was $1,000, I think, for the whole kit. It was cheap. And I still shot a 200 shot to that thing. And I had all those W2 heads, and man, it was just lightning fast. And I went from a 411 gear, and I went all the way down to a 355 gear because I had all that torque. And I was, I couldn't believe how much it didn't really make much more top end. It was just how much more torque it had, But until I hit the button, then it made a lot more. So, yeah. That was good stuff.
Well, and Mopar small block that's where it started coming into its own around that 2000 mark.
Yeah.
That's because you had those Mopar guys had Hot Rod and Carcraft. You had Freiberger was in charge of Carcraft, and they were before Freiberger went to Carcraft. And I really liked Freiberger. I was a big fan of that guy because Carcraft, when I was in high school, was everybody called it Camaro Craft. It was a freaking Chevrolet parts magazine, right?
Yep.
And let's see, where it got good had to be around 1993, 4, somewhere around there is where it started coming into its own. And when Freiberger took the helm, the magazine got really good. That was probably 95 or 6, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And they would test Mopar parts on Carcraft. And it was like, wow, this is amazing because Carcraft used to only do Chevrolet stuff, right? And Carcraft got to be a really good magazine. And it ran that way up until about 2002. And then they took him off of that and put him back on, like, say, Peterson's 4-wheel or something. And then from there to, like, Hot Rod. Okay? Yeah. And Hot Rod got really good when he came there. But the reason why it was good for Carcraft is because Carcraft was the low buck stuff. It was how to hot rod for low buck, right? And that was virtually Freiberger's mantra, right? I mean, he bleeds that crap, and that's where I got inspired. And then some of the stuff he did I feel was completely dumb. Like there was. I want to say he had a Dart one time. He put like a Imperial motor in a Dart, like a big 440 out of an Imperial and a Dart, and they didn't have the right cross member. So instead of cutting one, fabbing one up, what does he do? He puts a log chain around it. I think it was the solution. I think it was a log chain around the cross member and the transmission. Okay, yeah, that will work. There's about 400 other ways I would have solved that.
Right.
Because if you get the transmission in a bind, you're at the point of highest torque multiplication there, right? Especially first gear off the hit, and that's how you break tail shaft housings, or that's how you break the bell housings off. Yeah, and is dumb stuff like that, changing the alignment in the middle, because if it's moving 1 or 2 degrees on the motor mount, it's moving inches down at the transmission cross member, right? So there's weird things that they did that I just don't agree with, and I didn't think was smart. But that's where also that time frame is Steve Maggs. Steve Maggs was the freaking baddest dude. He got like his stuff. They didn't really run a lot of his stuff like, or he did articles that you didn't expect him to do. Just stuff on like a new cylinder head development by Dart. When he had a Duster and had a 318, I want to say a 4-barrel on it. And he sprayed it till the rods fell out of the pan. And I mean, he literally started at like 50 shot and ran it down the track, 75 shot, ran it down the track, 100 shot, ran it down the track, 125, 150, 175, 180, and it was like, it just kept going up and up and up and up. And it's like, how much will a stock motor without changing anything take? Well, it got to the point where he was spraying it with like 200 or 250 shot and it was blowing the plugs out, right? And like not out of the head, but I mean like it wouldn't spark, wouldn't arc across that. So he stopped that episode there, and they wrote that article and he put it in Hot Rod, and they came back the following month and he put a high performance ignition system on it just so it wouldn't blow the spark out. And he kept spraying it even more until the rods came out, and it came out like, I want to say 2 or 3 passes after that, because it got up to like 275 or 300 shot on the stock motor.
Wow. Speaking of that, real quick, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Would you paint? I'm kind of up in the air. Would you paint an engine that you're not really sure if it's going to, or how long is it going to last? Like, for instance, the engine that I'm building right now for my Dart. All right, I'm going to just spray. I'm going to put all the spray to it. Would you paint the block, or would you just leave it alone? I mean, it's paint-ish.
I'll tell you, I have a rule of thumb for this, and it depends. Is it supposed to be? You're going to run that 28-10-5 at No Name Nationals, or 28-10-5 at No Name Nationals, right?
Yep.
You know, anybody looking at it and seeing what's going on. Here's what I used to do, and it sounds freaking weird. If it was going to be something that you were really racing and you didn't want people looking at it or know, like, really what it was if you opened the hood, it was so drab or so mundane that nobody would take notice, right? The whole idea was I painted them all like flat black, right? Yeah. And I paint them flat black because it sucks the light right out of the engine bay, and you cannot see anything going on in there.
Yeah, well, you're not going to see much because remember, I have fender well headers,
right?
And then I have that intake, and then I have the valve covers, so you really don't see much of it.
If you're not worried about it,
I don't care.
I'd freaking clear it. I'd clear it, dude.
I'm going to leave it alone, man. Fuck it.
Not even spend any money on it. The only thing I hated about the black was if you had a leak, you could not find where that sucker was coming from, dude. You needed a magnifying glass and like a laser beam to have enough light to see.
Yeah. Because that thing's, I'm putting the oil pan on tomorrow, and then I'm flipping it over and I'm verifying TDC where number 1 is at in reference to the new harmonic balancer, so that way I know exactly where it's at, and then basically it goes back together, and it's done, and it goes in the car.
The Cookie Monster's eating cookies again, huh?
Well, I got to change some stuff. I still got to put the Ford 9-inch will be here, I think, in 2 more weeks, maybe.
Dude, you know what I would do? You're at home with your kids, right?
Yeah.
Once you get it all buttoned up, ready to go, and everything's kind of like all the internal pieces are kind of hidden away under valve covers and all that. Take your kids out there and get a whole bunch of different paints and have them dip their hands in it and put their hands all over the engine, right? And then clear it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it looks like, like it's just a memory for them. They're going to love it.
Yeah. Okay.
They're going to think that's crazy.
I'm as far as I know, I mean, this thing's got good parts in it. It's got concrete in it. It's got good heads. It's got port in it. I mean, it should go. It should last. I'm not trying to blow it up, but you never know with nitrous. You never know. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, just go easy and keep it on the fat side. That's how I did it.
Oh, I'm going to keep it on the fat side, but it's there's the kit I'm going to get can go up to. Well, I'm not going to tell you what it can go up to, but it can go up pretty high. And it's going to be a single stage, and it's going to be basically all in, off the line, there it goes.
See, I was looking at doing. You remember before they, but like way back in the day, and I'm getting behind because we got to catch up on the chat or we're going to lose everybody.
Yeah.
But way back in the day, the solenoids all had like a, I don't remember what it was, 1/4 inch or 5/16 hole through them. They all did. It didn't matter which solenoid manufacturer you had.
Yeah.
They all had the same hole. And so you could only flow so much nitrous. There was guys taking the jets out.
Yes.
And still, like
I did that.
It wasn't, okay.
I did that.
One day I realized you could actually do the same thing with a barrel valve, right? And I was really considering using a solenoid to run a barrel valve. And the barrel valve had like a freaking, you could get like an 8AN barrel valve, right?
Wow.
And that's what you use to essentially the high flow bottles, or the high flow outlet on the bottles was that. But that's where I ran into the thought was, well, how big is the opening in the bottle, right? The valve inside, because the threading on the outside is not really relative to how big it is. It's actually smaller than that inside the bottle. And that's when they came out with the high flow, the necks on the bottles, right? But I was thinking about just using a solenoid to run that thing. And dude, and it just like literally the world is your oyster. You could put 600 shot to it, out of one freaking 6AN or 8AN line.
Well, they have plate systems that are 500 now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they're not even bars anymore. They come around the whole perimeter.
That perimeter spraying. Yeah, I remember Zex came out with that. That was the first time I seen that.
Yeah, So that's So, anyways. That's
all right. Well, let's see. We'll catch back up. Tom Brown said he used to spray Simple Green cleaner on their dirt track tires and cover them with garbage bags to keep them extra soft. Yeah, it's the ozone that does that. Ozone in the air makes them harden up. Jonathan Couchy says that people are so into the comp cams, I think they bias how much probably HP they make on it to other brands. The Hughes Whiplash has similar duration and higher lift than the comp XE268H. They say one makes 300, XE350. To tell you the truth, I've only had a couple comp cams in my entire life. That XE268H is one of them. It was in a 455 Buick, and that was the snappiest running big block, and it was totally against everything you do in Buick lore. Okay, so you're supposed to have a dual pattern cam and favor the exhaust side, and the XE268H is literally everything is the same across the board. It's a single pattern cam. It's all the same. And I have no idea why, but that cam seemed to be the snappiest and happiest camshaft. And I think it's just because it's a good compromise of just about everything. It's a split right down the middle.
And I can vouch for this, is that I happen to work there, and I've seen the testing, and I've been part of the testing. And it is very rigorous as far as the camshaft testing. And when it's claimed, it makes it. So when they say that it makes X amount of power, it does. And I've actually seen it. I've seen it verified with all the new cams that are coming out as far as the engines. So yes, I can honestly say that this is correct.
Uncle Squirrel says that David Freiberger has contributed to the automotive hobby immensely over the years. Everything from rock crawling right up to it says rock rolling, but it says on the next one it says rock crawling. It's auto corrected. 240 mile an hour land speed cars. The dude is a legit times a million. I agree. I think he is a car guy, and whatever him and Tony had going on, I was not a part of that. I've only met the dude literally one time. We saw him at PRI this year. I didn't even bother talking to the guy because I didn't even want to hear it.
Yep,
but
I didn't talk to him either. I just waved him. What's up?
Yeah, I kind of just did my head nod and kept on going. But I met the guy one time. I did a hot rod power tour in 2003, and I was like the low buck guy. All right, so I was actually stationed in Guantanamo Bay. My grandmother had died, and they had flown me home for her funeral. And while I was home, I'm like, well, we'll take some lemons and make some lemonade. And I noticed hot rod power tours happening. Well, I'm a day late and $1 short. All the hotels are booked up. Everything's freaking sewn up and ready to go because I'm there, and it's happening within a couple of days. So I went down to Walmart. I bought a tent and a cooler and like water and stuff like that. And I literally jumped in my car and I drove down to Nashville to meet him in like 2003. And I started in Nashville, and it was at some big hotel, right? Because there's nothing hot rod in Nashville. I don't know. I just make that up, but I'm here. But so I set up my tent in the parking lot the first night, and everybody's like looking at me like I'm some weirdo. All I did was find the grass areas where they have the lights, and I set my tent up there. And it's only like 6 or 8 inches deep there with dirt. The rest of it's concrete, and it was just enough to drive your stakes in and hold your tent in place. So I set my tent up there, and it was like 4 or 6 person tent. It was pretty big. It was whatever they had at Walmart. I mean, I literally bought whatever they had and walked out the door. That's how I was going to do Hot Rod Power Tour. And anyway, it was me and a couple of guys ended up sitting out in the parking lot drinking beer and getting everybody to do burnouts, right, in the parking lot. And, the next day, everybody's like, hey, man, are you guys all right? Like, oh, yeah, just a bit hungover. We were out here till like 3 or 4 in the morning doing getting people to do burnouts and stuff. And they're like, yeah, we know. And everybody's talking about you. Like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you guys are making so much of a, hoopla. Everybody was having a good time. And it made everybody feel bad that they bought hotel rooms. So we went to the next place, and it's like 20 people wanting to stay out at my tent, right? And then it's like, so one guy that there wasn't enough room for him, so he went and bought another tent and set up in another inn.
Tent City.
And now we ended up having Tent City, and I'm taking showers in the morning. I'd take a water bottle and just leave it on top of my car for about an hour, and then you just poke a hole in it with a like a pocket knife at the top, and you just squirt it on your head, and then you lather up in the parking lot with nothing but shorts on. And I was taking a shower and a bath out there in the parking lot every morning, brushing my teeth, and then we get all cleaned up and ready for that day of Power Tour, right? And I mean I literally did that because it went Nashville, Memphis, Jackson, Mississippi, I think Gulfport, Mississippi, and then from Gulfport to like New Orleans, and then Houston, Texas, I believe. Yeah. But anyway, Freiberger came by, and we were in, I think we were still in Nashville, and he asked me, he said, hey, what do you think about a race where people drive their car to the race? No trailers allowed, none of that, right? And he was talking about what was going to end up being drag week. And I said, well, I thought about it for a few seconds, and I said, well, I've never seen anything like that before. I don't see why it wouldn't work. I said, but here is a caveat to it, right? Like, what if they break down in between and your race is over? Right? And he's like, well, yeah, I guess so. And I don't know what and that's the food for thought that I gave him, because he just gave me that, like, I was thinking 2 cars, right? Not hundreds of cars. Yeah. I wasn't thinking that, right? So it's like, yeah, your car breaks down in between these tracks. Your race is over,
You're
right?
done. Yeah.
And maybe that's where they came up with the idea of having multiple cars, hundreds of cars or whatever, or I have no idea. But he did not like that I gave him some, like, constructive criticism about it, right? Like, he asked me the honest to God opinion, and I figured it was worthwhile giving the guy the honest to God answer. Yeah. And he wasn't happy with it. And then I thought to that point, like, what a dick. But maybe I don't know. I looked at it like, yeah, maybe what a dick. Why would he get upset when he was asking me for an honest to God answer? And I give him one, and he didn't like it. Yeah. But I don't know. And that's, unfortunately, that was the only opinion I had of the guy. But I do like the stuff that he's done, and I don't really so much like him on the YouTube shows. I think he comes across better as written text in Hot Rod or Carcraft, and maybe that's because that's how I started reading it to begin with. Yeah. Yeah. But so Dakota's Timeout says, do a quickie red all can paint job is my vote.
That's exactly what I'm probably going to do. Just
Dude, have your kids
paint their hands. I'm going to paint it red, and then I'll paint their hands and put the handprints all over it. That sounds cool.
I'd have each one of them do a different color, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna have them. We'll go to Home Depot, pick out any color they want, come back, and we'll just paint their hands.
Yeah, just get the cheapo whatever kind of paint, and then what you do is you take like engine clear, like engine paint clear, because otherwise it'll burn off, right? Just clear right over that stuff, and it'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. I'll do something. I'll figure out something. That's a good idea. All right.
Jonathan Couchy says we're going to paint the 360 in the hot rod truck Ford blue because it is cheap, looks good, and we'll be able to see it in the leaks. Yeah. I ever since then, like I've always painted oil pans white so that when you crawl up, I do the blocks black, but I don't know if I've ever talked about this on here. I do the block black because it dissipates heat the quickest.
Yes,
right.
It does.
I do the oil pan white because it retains the heat in the oil, right? And the oil is the thinnest. The hotter it gets, the thinner it is. So when you start it off and it's already at half temperature versus being completely cooled down when it's black, I believe it works better.
Faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the rest of the engine is irrelevant. It can be whatever color.
Yeah. Aluminum, I just leave it. I leave the heads alone. So. Dust Devil Garage. Go down.
I'm like probably 20 minutes behind.
4, 5, 6, 7. Go 7 down real quick. Dust Devil Garage.
7 down from the one I'm at?
Yep.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. Shane, I'm looking for a set of small block fender well headers. Do you have anything for sale?
I don't. Not anymore. When I moved, all that stuff basically was a fire sale. I will have a set soon. Possibly. It depends on how long this engine lasts.
So D150 saying, how are you going to retard your timing, Shane?
I got an MSD Digital 6, and it's got 2 nitrous lines on it. So it's got start retard and a nitrous retard on it.
Let's see. Dakota's Timeout says I got a Lenati Voodoo cam in my Pontiac 455. I can't remember. Is the Voodoo like the?
Yes,
that's the choppy ones.
Yeah, well, Voodoo is just it's more like they're choppy and they're kind of like they're really fast ramp rates. I don't know a lot about them because obviously
is it a performance cam or is it a noise cam?
It's a little bit of both. Basically it's I think the Voodoo was kind of like they had smaller numbers, but they had really fast ramp rates, so there was a lot of area under the curve, so they made a lot of power for what they were.
Yeah, the one below that is asking the same question. So Clayton's Toolbox. We're going to answer that right now.
Yeah, so they work well. That's also part of Comp Cams or Edelbrock Group now, and Lunati is. So they're basically made at the same place, but they have different ramp rates and they're designed for a different type of thing. The Voodoos are basically just they're really fast action type deal, and they make more power than what normally people would for that, but there's always a trade-off. And the trade-off is it's going to be a little hard on your valve train because
you're noisy valve train.
Yes, yeah. So there's always a trade-off. There's no free lunch. You're going to get something here, but you're going to have to pay for it over here.
That's how the Mr. Rodder's BMF camshaft was. Man, it sound good though. Yeah. All right, Jonathan Couchy says, I have a Comp XE256H in a 318 4-barrel. It's amazing. I'm just saying people are biased towards them because they do work. If we upgrade cams in the hot rod, it will be a thumper cam. Don't do a thumper.
No, don't.
Yeah,
just stay. Yeah.
So Shane and I actually talked about this when I started screwing around with that BMF cam I was going to have ground. I found a thumper. It was hard to get Buick cams. You could not source a cam. And there was a thumper local to me. And he was like, look, I'm going to explain to you how these work. And correct me if I'm wrong, Shane. Mm-hmm. Essentially, it has the way the overlap is set up on the exhaust side is set up so you have that chop noise. And what it does is it opens that exhaust valve early
and blows it right out.
Blows all your power right out the exhaust side.
They're designed for low compression. When you tighten up the LSA, the lobe separation angle, you're going to trick the engine and think it's got more compression than it does. And then what they'll do is they'll run like, say, a 220 arbitrary number on the intake, but they'll run like 245 on the exhaust and put it on a 106. So you're just blowing it right out the exhaust, but it sounds awesome.
It does. They do sound good, but man, do they not run well. Let's see. Jonathan Couchy, when we do upgrade the engine in the hot rod, we'll get higher compression pistons to bring the 360 10-to-1 and then a thumper cam. Oh, man, don't do that thumper. Find something else.
Yeah, we'll make you a custom cam, man. Just Slant D the Garage Yahoo, or just call up one of the guys at Comp Cams. We'll make you a custom cam, and it's really not much more money and that way it's going to be exactly for your combination. But those 256s and the 268s, I mean, those are really good combinations for most street people. If you're going to have, dual plane intake and these headers and then, this carburetor, I mean, all the work's been done for you. And they've been tested with hundreds and hundreds of dyno pulls. And I can tell you, I've seen it to the point where you never think you get tired of hearing an engine running up to 6,500 RPM and going back down and going right back up. But you're like, okay, it's been 3 days. Come on. It's been 3 days.
Yeah, chocolate cake theory. Yeah.
Right.
You like chocolate cake? Can you eat it breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the week for the rest of your life? Yeah. I hate chocolate cake, right?
Dad loves us great. Gives us the chocolate cake. Remember that? Come on.
No, I don't remember that. I don't. I came up with the chocolate cake theory, but like I think I told you guys this. My first ship I was on, we were stationed in Japan, and the North Koreans and the South Koreans got into it, and then the North Koreans sunk a South Korean gunboat, and they sent us out like, we know you guys got back, Vincents are going, so we took off. Right, we literally pulled into port and took off, and nobody thought about food. And we get about, I don't know, a week into this, and we run out of everything, and it's like, holy crap! We got no scheduled port visit, and we got fuel for about a month. We can't just say we need to get food, and so we're like, what do? We ate chili mac for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for like 90 days, man, 30 days, some ridiculous number, to the point to where if I even smell chili mac, I will vomit immediately. I mean, like instinctively just vomit, throw up. I cannot smell it. It was just too much.
The chocolate cake was a stand-up show back in the 80s or 90s with Bill Cosby, and it's really funny. You should watch that sequence. Go to YouTube. Go to YouTube, put in Bill Cosby, and put "Dad is great, gives us the chocolate cake." It is the funniest sequence. It's like 5 or 9. It was like 9 minutes long of a sequence. And dude, it's funny. It's cool.
All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
So Tom Brown says, "What are your picks for the two most beautiful looking auto engines of any era?" Mine would be the Nailhead setup in the original Showboat and the Harry Miller V16 Indy engine. I agree with the Nailhead is probably one of the most sexiest looking engines ever made. Performance wise, it's not there, but it's like, God, what a good looking engine, especially with the aluminum valve covers and the fin valley pan cover, and good looking combo.
Gen 1 Hemi.
And that's
Gen 1. The first
actually, any of the Hemis do look good no matter what. But I mean, the early ones and
compact, because they were the size of a small block. You know what I mean? So like the 426 is a big engine. It looks like an elephant, right? That's what they call it. But the first generation Hemi was basically the block was kind of like, a small block Mopar. So it had all the compact features, and I just liked it. It just looks awesome.
I do like the early Hemis in a dragster. If you think about the engines that look great, were the ones that ended up in a slingshot dragster in the late 50s, early 60s, right? Yeah. Those are the ones that had the looks, right? And there was a couple of them out there that's like the Oldsmobiles, the early Cadillac stuff that was in there. Some of them are just gorgeous. Dakota's time out and asking, Shane, offhand, do you know how much a custom grind solid flat tappet cam would be for a small block Chevy?
I have no idea. None. And go to the one right above that one, Jonathan Couch.
Let's see. Well, it's gonna be a couple of years yet, but I'll reach out to you guys at Comp if you're no longer there, Shane.
Oh, I'll be there. I'll still be there.
Well, so, and the reason why Shane's saying that, one, he doesn't grind cams for Comp there. He works as an engineer, especially for TCI, but it's for the Edelbrock Group, right? But then the other thing is, I'm sure prices for that stuff has changed drastically. I used to be able to like rattle numbers off the top of my head. Like custom grind cam 2 years ago would have been about $350.
Yeah.
I have no idea where it falls today. I bet you it's probably closer to $450.
I don't even want to speculate right now because I don't know. I don't have a clue. So if you send a Pulido at edelbrock.com, I'll send it over to someone. and go from there. But you know what? I got to tell you, tomorrow is an awesome day for me. Do you know what I'm doing tomorrow for work? This is for work.
Are you going to the drag strip?
I'm going to the drag strip and doing 100 passes in a Charger. So I'm going to be doing 100 eighth mile passes.
Chocolate cake passes.
The first 30 are fun. After that, it's a job. It takes 5.5 hours. I've done this 3 times already.
Oh man, I bet it is kind of annoying to do that. But any time at the drag strip is a good time usually.
You know, I just can't complain. And I'm actually going with another guy who's just as excited. So we might just do 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. You know what I mean? Back and forth. So that way it never gets old. You know what I mean? You're always trying to up the score, you know?
Here's one that's a good question. Clayton's Toolbox says, I milled my heads 14 thousandths. I'm running a thinner head gasket. Is there a formula to figure out how much the intake needs to be milled to match? It's a small block forward. There's actually a trick to this whole thing. The trick is, you already know that you took 14 thousandths off the head. What's the difference between the head gasket that would have been standard, which was probably 40 thousandths, and the one you're running now, which is probably like, say, if it's 20 thousandths, so you got a 20 thousandths difference, right? So you add those two together, so you got 34 thousandths. Take your heads back to the machine shop and have them take 34 thousandths off the intake side of that head, and the problem is going to be solved.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's exactly what I was just going to say the same thing. I did the same thing.
Did you? I learned that one the hard way, where you end up milling it, and then you're like, oh, I need to mill the intake, and
this sucks.
I know, leaking water, and you can't figure out what's going on. And then the old machinist actually told me that, and he's like, no, you just take it right off the other side of the head. Oh, perfect. Let's see. John Murphy says that Cosby would have been in the late 70s. Look at his clothes.
Yeah, but it was that one was the
Oh, here you go. Oh, this is a good one. Buff Del Campo says the 406 Ford with the tri-power.
Yeah.
They would have had the chrome Thunderbird valve covers on the 406, I think. The Danny Boyd saying the 283 fuel injection with ram horn manifolds. You know, the Chevrolets, I agree with this 283 fuel injection setup. Mm-hmm. In the early years, they actually had some kind of like metal chrome covers that went over the spark plug wires. Maybe that was a vet only thing. I don't know, but it looks so funky and cool looking. Let's see. Mopar Man 1978 says that's classic Shane. Remember the show picture page with Bill Cosby and Fat Albert Mushmouth?
Yeah.
I never watched that one either.
Okay, so I just Googled it, and it was Bill Cosby as it's called himself, and it was in 1983. I remember it because I was a kid. I remember watching it, and I was just like, "This is the greatest." And I never watched stand-up comedy because I wasn't allowed to, but that one I was allowed to, and it was good. You should watch it. You can watch it on YouTube. I never watched it.
What show is it?
It's a stand-up routine he did. It's called Bill Cosby Himself, I believe.
Okay.
And it's just you can watch it on YouTube, and it's funny, man. It's back when he was probably still good, I guess. I don't know. Probably still.
It was probably good all the way up until he got in trouble for doping people or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, he was always funny. When I was a kid, that was like the dude that I must have had 10 tapes of his. Right?
Yeah.
Of his stand-up routines that have been recorded over the years, and this is not 8-track, okay, but it is cassette tape. He used to have a skit called "For Russell, Whom the Brother I Slept With." Right, dude, that has to be the funniest skit for a child, like if that has siblings. The funniest, I swear. The dad's like, I'm going to come in there with the belt, and he says, I'd never seen the belt before, but I've heard stories. It was 6 feet long and had hooks on it. It ripped the flesh off your body as it hit you, right?
Yeah.
and I mean, it was ridiculous. I love that one. And my kids love it too. It's so funny. But Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage says the Boss 429 looks pretty good, and I believe he's kind of biased. He does have
looks good with the tunnel ram. Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, well, his Boss 9 looks legit, even though it's not a Boss 9. That's a small block Ford, folks.
Still looks good.
It does.
For people who don't speak Ford like me, I would never know. Honestly, I would have to really, really look at it. I couldn't just say, that's small block Ford with heads, but I would never know.
And then Andy's saying, don't forget the camera. I didn't forget the camera. I think the camera was probably all right. Look, it looks too big. It looks disproportionate to me.
Well, that's the reason why the 426 Hemi is not my favorite, is because it's so big. I mean, it's an awesome engine, but for me, I think the Gen 1 Hemi just does it for me. That's what I like.
And then Danny Boyd's saying the 95 Lightning with the real deal GT40 intake manifolds. To tell you the truth, EFI kind of ruined it for me. They never looked good like the carbureted stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it was like lipstick on a pig kind of. I mean, it's virtually the same engines, but what happened is it lost that air cleaner on top. It lost the valve covers blending into the air cleaner kind of. I think the heyday was probably around 1972, where it would look really good. Where you got factory chrome valve covers on stuff, like your Boss 351 Mustangs and stuff like that. The Clevelands with the Power by Ford chrome valve covers, and oh, dude, that's when they were like really looking good. Let's see. Junkyard D says, in 100 passes, what are the odds of hitting a perfect light?
I do it at least twice is my average.
So that would mean 2%. Right? If he's doing 100 passes and he does it twice, it's going to be 2%. That's so, Shane's by himself. So
yeah, but I it's not a pro tree. It's a 5/10 tree. It's a full tree is what I guess what they call it. So for me, it's so slow. It's just I'm actually, even to hit a perfect light or even get a 10, I feel like I'm holding back because I'm so used to the pro tree. Does that make like it's like the bottom bulb is glowing at me and it's like, okay. And then I still am like, a 10th,
I
barely.
just think that your perfect lights would start to come towards the end when you get so many of them under your belt and you're going back to back to back to back to back that you can literally just like murder it. You know?
For me, it's the middle. It's
Is
right
it in the middle.
It's right in the middle. I usually sneak up on it, and then after that, I start to red light, and then I start back again at like say at like, a 10th, or 100th, 100th, like a point 0.01, and then I start getting in that range, and then you start getting into the double O's, like a 004, 005, and then pretty soon you get that 0000, and then one time I went 1/1000th under red. Most of the time for a red, it's because I pushed through the lights, So
you just can't get the car in the same spot either. Usually, it's the big ones.
And it's an 8-speed transmission, so it's
when
hard.
Shane and I, when we match race, Shane had trans brake, and I was trying to match race foot brake. Okay, you want to know how hard match racing foot brake on a pro tree is? That's freaking hard. You want to set some challenges up for yourself? Try that. My rollout was stupid just because the reaction time was so slow compared to how my car would react compared to Shane's car leaving on a trans brake, right? And you would murder like a 10th off the tree just by having a trans brake. And that's where the pro tree comes into play, being 4/10 instead of 5/10. Okay. So when I knew I was going to race Shane, and he had me by the tree no matter what. And here's the thing is, like, when we were match racing, the rule of thumb was they would pair you up with somebody who was within a 10th of you. You would not anything outside that.
Less than a 10th. Actually, it's within 500.
Maybe half. Yeah, maybe 500s either side.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the sad part was, 500s either side, is literally a 10th, and you can give that away up on the starting line easily. And no matter what, Shane could be slower every time and just whack me to death, like murder me on the tree, right? And so I got this app. Jegs used to have an app. I don't know if they even do anymore for iPhones and stuff. And I would practice on that thing like 2 hours a day. I'd get my rollout right, and I'd figure it out and just freaking hammer away 2 hours a day on that thing. And that was the only time I had good lights was when I raced Shane. The rest of the time was just not so good.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I made you work for it.
Yeah, you did. You did. And it didn't come lightly, man. I really worked for it for about 6 months up until the day it was happening. I mean, I don't know if you saw me, like, something did happen. I remember my door stopped closing. It would not latch. Right? And I'm like, how the hell am I going to run this race? I never even figured my door would break, and it was the weirdest thing. It literally was like one round in and the door wouldn't close and latch anymore. I was having to slam it. And this is a race car, so it literally has nothing in the door. There's nothing there. And it just stopped latching. The latch mechanisms just stopped working. And so I took what was the old factory seatbelt and I secured the door with the old factory seatbelt, and then I essentially ratcheted it down till it was taut, and then I climb in through the passenger door. But it wasn't that easy because it's a T-Bird. If you've ever seen the inside of a T-Bird, it's like 3/4 the size of a Mustang, right? It is really low slung, and the whole reason for it was, you got to remember, this car was designed from the factory to run 200 miles an hour in NASCAR. Right? It's got a lower profile windshield, and there's no room inside of it to be standing up. The other thing was, you got a roll cage in there without swing out door bars or anything like that. You have to climb over them. And the third, mine is EFI, and the EFI computer and all the wiring was in the passenger floorboard. So I'd have to like literally gravitate over towards the driver's side seat and then just like fall into it. Right? And it was freaking hard that day.
What's funny about that is that after that, we were getting ready to go for the last race. And remember that guy oiled down the track, or there was a crash at the big end, and we were there for an hour, sitting at the end of the water box for an hour.
SoCal. Here's how it goes. You got to build it up, Shane. You got to tell how it really was, man.
Okay.
It's July.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In SoCal, on top of a mountain, right?
Dry, hot.
Oh my God. It must have been 105 degrees there. And it's probably 125 in the car. And he and I were literally waiting in line. The car in front of us broke. The pair in front of us wrecked, blew up and whatever. And we were in full gear. So you got your helmet on, your hood sock, your freaking neck brace, a hand. And because the cars are not running 1020, in the 8th mile. They're running freaking 620 in the 8th mile, which requires like 5 times the amount of safety equipment, right? So you got a full fire suit get up on, shoes, non-burning shoes, and fireproof socks and gloves, and the whole 9 yards. And then your windows don't roll down because good for you, race car, right? Yeah, my windows don't roll down. There's actually, they're locked into place. So, but it was hot. And we're just sitting there waiting. And what was sad is, like, they had a film crew there that was filming this race, and they were walking around looking. They had the camera on the ground, and they were coming up like the driver's side fender, and then they see you in there. And the only thing I can imagine, I never saw what that looked like, but it had to be like my visor shut and fogged over, and then like it looked like a fishbowl inside there with like a goldfish swimming by.
I remember he came by and they did that whole shot on me, and I remember I felt the sweat dripping off my eyebrows and coming onto my cheeks, and I'm just like, that's a terrible shot. That's going to be terrible.
When we finally got done with it, I didn't even care if I won or lost or any. I just wanted to be out of the car.
Yeah.
Let's see. D150 says, so I just showed my buddy the difference from a 446 pack rod and a 454 rod, and he crapped his pants. If you had seen them, you would understand.
Yes.
I imagine it's probably that 446 pack rod is much beefier.
Yes, a 454 rod is very close to a small block Mopar. I think they're 6'1" where small block Mopar is like 6'1" and so it looks physically, except for the pin size, is slightly bigger on the 454, but they look identical. So when you look at a 6-pack rod, it's like this massive just club compared to that thing,
I don't know. All the stuff I've always messed with is just ridiculous. The small block Buick has a 6.4-inch long rod, pretty much. It's 6.385.
Yeah.
Right? The small block. The big block's 6.7.
Wow. That's like big block Mopar. Yeah. So you wouldn't be as impressed, but big block Chevrolet guys see that and they're like, whoa. Yeah.
Let's see. Danny Boyd says that when my car doesn't start, I breathe heavily into the carburetor and it always starts. You need to lay off them those road
Shots.
sodas, buddy.
Yeah, stop doing those shots before you go driving, you know.
Let's see.
We are far behind.
Yeah, Danny Boyd saying that Bill Cosby has had an original Shelby Cobra. I think he sold it, but it wasn't just the Shelby Cobra. It was that, was it the King Snake? It was the freaking hairy one, the supercharged 427 deal. And it was ridiculous, stupid fast.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll catch up here.
Yep.
Maybe I am caught up. No. John Murphy says the front timing cover on the Camry makes it look a little off. Mm-hmm. I think it looks too disproportionate, right? Like
it's pretty big, yeah.
I think maybe it might just be the size of them valve covers. You could be right. That timing cover could be leading up to it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Uni Motorsports Garage. That's why I want 85 Mustang GT with the last of the carb cars. Has that dual snorkel 302. That actually looked really good on the car. That dual snorkel 302 with the air cleaner, where it said 5.0 HO.
HO.
Yeah.
I love that. Moving on down.
You know what, Uncle Squirrel, you're right, man. The 348, 409, the W motors, they look damn good. I remember I found a truck one time. I opened the hood and I saw that valve cover and I was like, oh, I hit the jackpot. It's a 409. And spent half a day taking it out. And then my dad, he was like, oh, what'd you find? A 348? I said, what's a 348?
A small 409.
Yeah. You might as well leave that there. Aaron Germanson says, been a while, finally spring in no DAC, fired up the Magna 360 and the 92 D150 today. She was a gallon low on antifreeze. I filled it, no leaks. Warmed it up, no leaks yet. I wonder if that might be a freezy plug, buddy.
Yeah.
D150 says, Shane, tell me about the gas holes in your pistons. I am ignorant.
Oh, that's just to help the ring seal. So basically, when the gas goes around there, that forces it down and it pushes the ring out. It's just for racing stuff. It's just to help, depending on your ring pack. And I'm running a Molly top, and I think I'm running a cast iron second. So it's just going to help for sealing. And that's also too helps when you're running nitrous. It'll help the ring seal. Keeps it always pushed down, so there's no ring flutter.
What's your thoughts on I was always told the Grump made that, or is the one that figured that out.
I don't know. Figured it out. I really don't. I know that Dick Landy was doing it for a while, so I don't.
I was told the Grump is the one that figured that out. That with the gas porting of the pistons, where the pressure on top pushes the ring out from behind. Yeah,
it pushes it down and out. And what that does is it keeps it from fluttering when it's going up and down. When it goes to the top dead center. And then when it fires, it doesn't flutter. The pressure is always down and it holds it down when it goes down. So, Professor Keith Black was voted best engine builder 10 times. Mm-hmm. He never wrote a book. What might have been his secrets? I'm guessing it was machinist skills since all was done in-house. 100%. When you're a machinist, your attention to detail is second to none. And basically when you're building an engine, the whole idea of it is the devil's in the details. It's what you overlook, and it's set up. And because he's a machinist, he always did it right the first time. That's exactly right. Building a good engine is just about is just attention to details. And I always write everything down, and I go back and check. So that way I'm not second guessing myself. Did I do this? Did I do that? It's written down. I know exactly what it is. And that's what Keith Black's secret that he took to the grave is essentially his tolerances that he would allow for whatever it was, right? The piston to bore, the skirt to bore, the how much side clearance between each rod. All that stuff adds up. If you can save 1 horsepower here, 1 horsepower there, it doesn't sound like a lot. But after you've done 100 1 horsepower saving secrets, now you have 100 more horsepower. Yep.
right?
And then they start to compound because
Right.
now you're freeing up more horsepower, which makes more horsepower on the other end.
Or like in turn, what makes the camshaft work better at a wider area, wider power curve. There's a lot of things that that add up to that, and that's where I'm sure Keith Black was one of the first guys to figure it out. Because see, when Keith Black came along, you got to remember it was the infancy of top fuel funny car or top fuel drag racing, which was your dragsters first, and then the fuel funny cars came along. But when he started doing it, everybody was going to the junkyard and getting a motor out of something that was a daily driver, pretty much, and then they would just re-ring them in the driveway and put them in.
Yeah.
So Keith Black was having to figure it out from the get-go, the beginning. What was the problems with this one? And then like increase the oil flow. Well, what's the problems with that one? Oh, we need to use a tighter ring package, or we needed to use a looser ring package, was probably the case.
Yeah. Smaller rings too, thinner.
Yeah, but a lot of that stuff it's hard to figure out when you're the first guy. It's easy to come along and take all those same things that somebody else has already done.
Since we're still on this topic, go down to the very last one. Tom Brown asked a question.
I was actually just going to click on that when I saw it.
Yeah. Actually, no, it does exactly the opposite because you're not fluttering the rings, so no fuel, unburnt fuel gets past the rings. So the holes only go down to the ring, basically the top of the ring. And because you're putting the force on top of the ring, it's not fluttering, so there's less blow by is what you're doing.
And it's only on the top ring that you have the gas ports, right?
Only the top ring. And that's, you got to run a special ring for that. I believe it's now, I got these things, in 2016, 17, I think is when 16 we raced, and I got the new pistons in 17. So I believe it was a Molly top and it's a cast iron second, I believe, but they're super thin. So it helps with that too.
I remember when I first got the pistons for my Cleaver motor and my T-Bird,
Yeah.
and they had those 43 thousandths rings, and I'm like, God, 43,000, and I thought this is half of a ring that I started, like the stuff that I normally mess with is half the thickness, right, of this ring. Gosh, it looks so thin.
On the Gen 3 Hemi that I just finished, those are
They're
even
1 millimeter, right?
Dude, they're tiny. I can literally take that piston and just move it up and down with 2 fingers in that bore.
So when I started messing with small block Fords, that's where the first time I'd ever seen the thinner rings, right? Because Ford did that in like the mid 80s, like say 86, 87. They went to a 1.5 millimeter? I think it's 1.5 millimeter ring, and it had the Napier cut on the end, so it's like really, really sharp, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna take the rings off, and you get done, and you got like meat
Cuts.
bags for hands, right? Like they're just murdered because they're bleeding
finger.
all over the place.
See that slice right there?
Yeah, and they get you, and you don't even know it until you get the next piston and ring because the oil gets in it.
Yeah, it
That's
burns.
the only time you know. Yeah.
Yeah, that last weekend, my fingers are just murdered. I'm still got cuts on my knuckles from right there for the rings because they got Napiers on them too, and it just fillets off your it just touches it, it's gone.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, I hated Napier rings. I thought, man, what is going on? My hands are getting soft or something, right? That's what I first thought it was. And then it's like one of the old timers there was like, no, son, you got the thinner rings with the Napier cuts on them.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
it's like a
what's
razor
that?
blade.
He said, it's tapered to like virtually a razor blade on the end.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, then from there it's, what do they put? It's a steel ring. It's like some kind of tempered steel ring. It's not a cast iron ring. You could twist them in a pretzel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they got some kind of coating on the end that makes them stay sharp like that for a long time.
Maybe that's what I have on those. Like I said, I felt it cut like cast iron, but
Plasma moly, that's what it is. Plasma
maybe that's
moly.
what it is. Yeah, because it cut like 6 rotations on that ring would cut off about 5 thousandths. Each rotation was about thousands, but the top ring, it was like 6 rotations for 1,000th. Because it was so hard.
Oh yeah. That's how I always end up screwing up the rings. It's never the top ring that you screw up. It's always the second one.
Second ring.
And that's because the second is so much softer, and you're used to doing all the tops because you did all the tops in a row,
Do the second one first. That's what I always do. I do the second one. Well, I do them one at a time. So
that makes sense. I have never thought of that.
I do the second one first, and then once I do the second one, I know that, and then I go and do the top one, and then you're like, you know.
How do you do them? You have a file to fit hand crank one?
Yeah, I got a hand crank one, and then I made a video of it too. And what I do is I take the rings and I squeeze them together up against a white wall to make sure that the angle is correct between the two. And then I put it in the ring, and I got a squaring tool. I just put them in there, square it, put them in there, and I made a little video on it how I do it. And
so here's how I do it. I do just one side of the ring.
Yeah, me too. I only do one side of the ring also.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then I'm so lazy. I hated cranking on that thing, so I just took the end off of it and I chucked my drill up on it.
I did that, but you take off too much
really fast.
Yes. Yes. You take off too much. Yeah. So that's why I just do the hand crank, and I always take off the side that has the dot or the symbol or whatever, so that way I always know.
Oh, so, which one's up? Yeah.
Yeah. So not only what it's up, but also too, I know that when I take the engine back apart and I have to do it again, that's the side that I always take off, is the one with the dot or the indicator mark that's on the ring.
Oh, so you must have just regapped all those rings for some nitrous oxide.
Maybe.
I know you were kicking the idea around. Big Belly Racing asks, Shane, are you still going through emails? I haven't received a reply yet.
Where? What, did he get? I'm through them.
Huh.
I don't know. Well, the wife was helping me go through them because there was a lot. So send it again. Just do me a favor, send it again, because I'm telling you right now, now it says 0. So yeah.
Oh, it may have went into the trash. Oh, some of the ones I do get that they go right in the trash, and then I get an email, like a scolding email. You know, hey, you didn't answer my question, or you didn't reply back, and it's like, what are you talking about?
Okay, in the spam, I've got over 500 emails in spam, and trash. So, Big Belly, just send it again. Just send it again, and I'll make sure it's you here.
Nicholas R says, "Ahoy, y'all! Finally made it live for the first time in a month or more. Well, hey, welcome back, buddy. You haven't missed a lot. Just a lot of chatting about automotive related topics."
Hey, you know what's funny is I got something to say real quick.
Sure.
One of my viewers, actually, I got two things that happened. One of my viewers, his car is being dropped off here. He's from Texas, and I'm only going to give his first name. Is Gilbert, and it is a Slant 6. It's a 64 or 65 Dart, I believe, convertible. And he wants me to do some voodoo magic on it, so that way he can drive it down the freeway just like I do. So I'm going to rebuild it, take it out, and I'm going to do a whole series on everything that I've learned on a Slant 6 to make them live at 25 to 2600 RPM, make decent power so where you can drive these things in everyday traffic. And I'm going to do it step by step by step. So it's a whole series.
If I have the cash, you've kind of inspired me on this, because I found my awesome, if I could, AHRA vehicle.
Okay.
It's a 1980 Pontiac Grand Le Mans wagon.
Nice.
Right? It's the same size as a Malibu wagon, but it's got a 231 V6 Buick in it. All right.
Oh, okay.
And I thought what would be kind of cool is, like, hey, I could leave the 231 in there, get some little pep out of that thing, and like a turbo 200 3-speed, right? Oh, okay. Real small, lightweight, something that doesn't eat up a lot of horsepower and torque, or maybe a manual. I don't know. But God, there was one. That's what got me thinking about it. There's one on Facebook Marketplace, and the thing is like 28,000 original miles. They want $11,000 for it, but God, it looks cherry, dude. And I thought it would be kind of cool to have something like that. But then, yet again, I'll be in the same situation I am with the old Ford truck, where I'll be replacing stuff and working on it all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, I need to cut some of that out.
Yeah. So it's going to be cool. So if you guys are interested, it's going to be a series. It's going to be delivered tomorrow morning here, and I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be at work, but I think I'm going to pull it out this weekend, and I got a busy weekend this weekend, and then I'm going to start taking it apart so we can kind of do an autopsy on it. I have so many extra blocks out there. He thinks it's 60 over already, which is kind of a no-no. I mean, they will run fine racing at 60 over, But if you're going to drive it and really beat on it like what I do, they tend to get hot 60 over. It's hard to keep them cool. Even with big radiators, they just seem to. I have a 60 over block in there that just sits there because it's ready to go, but I can't keep it cool. Cool enough because I'm really beating on these things. 30 overs and 40 overs like the magic number. So regardless of what he has, I got an extra block. I'm going to look at his head. I've got about 5 or 6 different extra heads. And then hopefully his factory oil pump's good. Because if his factory oil pump's good, then I can just rebuild that and then put the squirter in there for the gear. And then I'm going to do all the little oiling tricks so that way we get oil up to the top, like twice as much oil as regular. And then I'm going to put the set screw in there. 109 thousandths, I believe, is what's in the set screw. So yeah, I'm all about restricting oil with set screws. So that way you still have the flow, but you keep the pressure down on one side. And because of the closed orifice, you can go. That's a lot of math.
I do the same thing. Yeah, that's how I limit what I want. Like the Buick engines don't have priority main oiling. That's if you have a real, true factory built performance engine or something that was geared toward performance or longevity, because a lot of it came just from the heavy duty truck line. It'll have priority main oiling, right? And priority main oiling essentially means that right off the pump goes right to the main and rod bearings. Okay, and then everything else just gets what's left over. The Buick everything has priority oiling, right? Including your rocker arm for no reason. And what ends up happening is that liberal use of oil in areas that are unnecessary ends up starving the main in critical situations.
Yep.
And so what you do is you can't force it to change to oiling because generally when you have priority main oiling, it'll have an oil galley there'll be 2 separate oil galleys in it, right? One of them will be priority main. That's the first one that gets fed. And then everything after that gets fed to the second galley, which feeds everything else. Okay. The older engines generally just have one oil galley, right? It goes all the way to the length of the block. And it feeds rocker arms, feeds cam bearings, feeds rod bearings, rods, mains, the whole 9 yards. Okay. And that's just oiling. All right. And it makes everything priority. And what you do is you try to restrict the oil going to the top end, and that way it forces more oil to be used in the bottom, right? And the big trick on that really, like if you have oil through the block like a Mopar does or an early Buick, you used to be able to just drill. Or you don't even drill it. That hole is normally 5/16, I think, and you just run a 3/8 tap down in there because 5/16 is the perfect size for a 3/8 tap. And then you get a 3/8 set screw and you put this 3/8 set screw down in there and then you drill it out to, like, say, instead of being 5/16, now you make it, let's say, a 1/16 of an inch, okay? Or an 1/8 of an inch, because an 1/8 of an inch is what? 0.1, yeah, 1/8 of an inch is a 0.125, right? So I guess a 16th of a point or 62,000, almost 63,000. So math in public, I'm never good at it. I guess you just restrict it to where it just gets enough oil to lubricate the top end, and everything else is forced to go to the bottom. Has no choice.
You're just trying to you want the flow, but you don't want the pressure.
Right.
What you keep the pressure on the other side of the orifice, and that's a closed orifice rule. So you can Google closed orifice, and there's a lot of math for it.
Oh well, it's what's called an orifice plate. Is it called a closed orifice?
Oh well, you have closed orifices, you have closed orifice plates. I mean, there's a whole
because you got the high pressure side and the low pressure side, and that's all you're looking at. That's the only difference that you're looking at. So that restricted small orifice is going to allow, so much on one side. Now the pressure will be the same, but the volume will be considerably less.
Yes.
Right. And that's coming on the high pressure side. On the low pressure side, it'll be really low pressure because the volume has just increased by a bunch.
Yeah, and it now on the Slant 6, because it's going up to a rocker arm, there's really nothing holding the pressure in there, and that's the reason why when you start opening up the oil galley going to the top, it just floods in there, and so that's why I use that hole, because there's nothing to restrict, there's nothing to keep it in there. So then this way it has literally 3 times as much flow of oil, but it's under a lower pressure because it's just flowing oil, but the pressure on the other side of the screw is much higher.
So D150 says, so I want to use the MSD dial timing retard unit. Have either one of you guys used it? Also, what is max nitrous oxide for hypertectic pistons?
150 I could get away with on the hypertectic pistons. When I ran those Keith Blacks, remember those? They came in a kit. They're like cheap. They were like $230.
Right.
And 150 was a safe number. I did get away with 200 a few times. It just takes one backfire or one little thing, and then they go
crack.
kaput.
They don't do like
safe.
Yeah, they don't do the. That's the sad thing about hypertectic pistons is they have the difference between a cast piston and a hypertectic piston is that essentially is the same thing. It's a cast piston, but it has cast with a high silicone content, which makes them really strong, but brittle, right? And when you have, like Shane was saying, you got detonation or backfire, it won't just crack the piston and the engine will continue running with a crack. It generally shatters the piston, and they come apart like if you were ceramic. And then next thing you know, you got a rod with a wrist pin slinging around inside the motor, which just is like the worst case scenario because it will literally wipe out everything.
Yeah.
It's like take your lawnmower, cut one blade off of that. If it's like, it should have a balanced blade. Cut one side of it off, and then attach a socket on a chain on the other end, and then just turn it on and see what happens. You're gonna have a freaking melee destruction right there.
Now, I did have a digital, dial, because back when I had the 6AL box before I got the digital 6, I put one of those little dials in it when the wife was still driving it, and we were street racing a lot. So I would change the carburetor, I would back the timing off, and it was just a dial, so I could take off the 6 degrees I needed, or whatever it was, 4 degrees, and then that way she could run the regular pump gas. And then on the Friday when she would come up, we would turn the timing back up, we'd change the carburetor, let's go racing.
See, I never ran one of those the timing dial retards. I had an automatic one to where you arm the nitrous and it would pull however many degrees you needed to pull, right?
Yeah,
so,
no, the dial one wasn't for nitrous. The dial one was for like
start retard or something.
Yeah, but, well, it's for fuel. So if you were driving up a hill and you started hearing spark knock, you could just reach over and just turn it down, and it would just dial back the power.
Mine did have that function, but I never used it. Mine was a digital piece though from. There used to be a lot of different ignitions like that, and mine was an Excel 300 Plus, is what it was called.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but let's see here. Jonathan Couchy asked, Shane was a good aftermarket piston that can be put into a 360 without balancing. I'm talking about something that would bring compression to 10-1 with 65cc chambers and small rings. Man, I'll tell you what I know probably off the top of my head.
What's that?
You get a factory replacement piston from, like, say, Speed Pro or somebody that's for a Magnum.
Yeah.
I bet that Magnum would have a 1.5 millimeter Napier style ring.
It's a good ring, but as far as not balancing, though, that's because most of the 360s are basically externally balanced anyway, so there's really not much to do on those.
That's why you stick with the factory replacement stuff, because you're going to be within the factory piston specs, right? So you don't have to balance them. Yep, that's why you do with a Speed Pro. I don't know if Speed Pro even exists anymore. There used to be another one that was similar to Speed Pro, Sealed Power. I don't know if any of those guys even around anymore. A lot of them got bought out by Molly. But Molly would still, if Molly does own them, they still own a majority of those pistons. Somebody's going to make a factory replacement piston for a later Magnum, or they had an LA with a roller cam in it up to like 92. So I bet you those you could probably get a piston with a 1.5 millimeter Napier ring on them. Yeah,
that engine was only out for like 2 or 3 years, So hey, we got a super chat. Wow, look at that.
We did. Oh, dude, somebody sent $100.
Yeah, wow.
Oh man, am I way far behind? Who's this?
It's D150.
Really?
Yeah, thanks, man. That's awesome. Thank you.
Man, that is amazing. Well, I appreciate the cash. You didn't have to send that much, but the AHRA will appreciate it, and we'll take Shane out for lunch. And I promise he'll get the lunch.
One thing I want to say before I forget this, I just popped in my head again. I was talking to Mopar Joe, and I told him that if he wins, I'm going to give him $200, but If he wears a Slant Daily shirt and wins, I'll give him an extra $100.
Oh, that's cool.
So he could win up to $300.
Yeah, he's going to have some cash coming in on this one deal. Yeah. Let's see. Michael Schmidt says inexpensive 6 and 12 volt fuel pumps, overseas made. I bought 5 so far. I have installed 3 yesterday, and I'm assuming that means that all quit.
Yeah, none work. Yeah, they don't last very long.
They're
honestly,
meant for just fuel transfer, I think, is what they're for.
Yeah. The last pump I bought was one of those Carter style pumps. I always call them the Carter pumps, but I used to get them at Napa.
Those are good pumps. Those were factory pumps on stuff.
Yeah, they work great. In fact, I have one of those on my diesel truck as my lift pump. When my lift pump died, I put one of those on it, and I've never had a problem with it. It puts 15 pounds to the CP3 pump, and it works beautiful.
The Carter is a pressure regulated pump. I want to say it's set at like 4.5 or 5 pounds.
They have two. They have the low pressure and high pressure one.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they have a low pressure, which is like up to 6 pounds, and then one that goes up to 15 pounds.
Okay, well, so that Carter pump came factory on the Buick Riviera in like 71, 72. You could order a Riviera with an electric fuel pump on it, and those were the factory pumps. Now, here's the cool thing is like you can buy those. They used to be real cheap. They used to be like $40, $50. I don't know if I know Carter's gone, but I don't know if the factory that was making Carter pumps still makes them, but they used to be called Carter pumps up through the 90s.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're called now.
I'm actually trying to look it up real quick. It's still
where I used to get them was PAW had them.
Yeah, it's still a Carter. It's still got the same. Now this one right here, this one is the 4 to 6 pound for 72 gallons per hour. It's a Carter P4070, and that's the one you want. That's the good one. That's for the low pressure.
How much are they now? They're about $60.
Let's see on eBay. It's showing 75, $80, $100 on another one. You can get a used one for like 45.
Yeah, don't do the used. I don't.
No.
I try not to do a used fuel pump because they won't like generally after they've had fuel in them and they sat for a while, they're just too many problems. But if you get a new one, I'd jump on that new one. I'm telling you, man, that's a good reliable pump.
Yeah, I've had it on my truck for 15 years.
I had a Holly Red one time, and the Holly Red did not last as long as that Carter did. And that Carter, I think, was designed for OEM manufacturers.
Yeah, and I think the other one I'm talking about is the P4601HP, and that's the one that goes at 15 pounds. It's 150 gallons, I believe. I believe that's it. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of Googling here. So.
Tom Brown's wondering, are you doing the trans and gears also on your on the Cookie Monster?
Yeah. Well, the trans is going to be a Power Glide, and the rear end's putting got a 4.9-inch going into it. So, and I think the gear, I'm either looking at a 411 or a 430 gear. Not really sure. Because I don't want to just have an 1/8 mile car. For me, even though there's not really a 1/4 mile track around here, I just like the car always being able to do a 1/4 mile, not have to change the gear. And plus, it's going to be instant torque. So I'm going to, and just for prep, you take some of the hit out of it. So, and I'm going to be running a 180 first in this
we
thing.
talked about this before. Is saying I told you that my philosophy on that whole thing, and that's if you build the car to run the 1/4 mile, you can always run an 1/8.
Yep.
But if you build it to run an 1/8 mile, it can't run a 1/4.
That's right.
Right. So you got twice as many tracks to choose from.
Yep. And they can always just hit it with more nitrous if you don't have enough gear.
Spray and pray. So Twisted Mopar Garage has been retired 2 years now. I swear I work harder now than I did when I was working. I can believe that, dude. I am retired Navy, and I work twice as hard now than I did when I was in the Navy, if you can believe that. So the only thing is, now I just miss my family from 10 feet away instead of half the world away. So,
but at least you can put the tools down and come inside. Right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. And I've been doing that a lot.
Yeah,
so,
me too.
There's nothing more important than the time you can't get back. So kids are only young once. Twisted Mopar Garage, I ran into. He says, I ran 2 360 Mopars at 60 over, never had a heat issue. It depends which block you have, right?
Yes.
It's engine specific pretty much.
And slant, and these are slant 6s, and that is such a long stroke. It's 125 stroke into 225, and that's 60 thousandths meat gone. That's 30 thousandths per side. That makes a big difference in that engine, and the way that water system works. The number 6 is so hot by the time the water gets back there, because it goes all the way down, then it goes up, and then comes all the way forward. It just cooks. It just overheats that, and then by the time it gets to the head, the number 1 part of the head, the number 2 and 1 cylinder, I mean, it's really hot back there. On the head, on that block, I could almost get like a 7 or 10 degree difference between the front of the head and the back of the head, just because of the water absorbing the head going forward. That's how long that engine is and how much fluid's in it. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's those inline motors. The inline motors, I imagine where the pump's at, where it starts, and it works itself all the way to the back and then has to come forward to cool.
Yep.
All right. So Tom Brown says that we used to drill the center 3 mains on the cam journals on the small block Chevrolet for priority oiling. I don't know what... I'd have to look. I'm sure it's different on every single engine. I'm 100% certain. But I need to figure out some way to make the Buicks live a little bit better. If I could put some plugs in the cam and the lifter assembly, I don't know. I need to figure out something that's going to...
If I looked at the oiling system on it, I could figure out something for you.
Well, I think it's just... It depends which engine I'm messing with. Early oiling or late oiling. You know, if I got oil through the head, that's simple. You just plug it and drill it to whatever size you want. But you need to sit. I need to sit down and do the math with you. The drop of how much volume I would drop across that orifice, because it still needs to function.
Yeah, and it does with viscosity and weight. You know, it's really what's going to do. And temperature. That's where you get the logarithmic of it. So it's.
Huh. Yeah. Mohawk 62 is out of here. Darn it, I have to go. Thanks, Dallas and Shane. Another awesome live. Have a great night, everyone. See you all later. Thanks for stopping by, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Twisted Mopar Garage says, if you're overheating, vacuum leaks, timing, running lean. Now, a lot of it has to do with your 360 Mopar probably has a lot more cast iron in it around the cylinder walls, which makes it a better heat sink. And that's really what it comes down to it, because there's engines that I know for a fact you cannot take a 302 Ford and bore it 60 over. You cannot, right? It will overheat. 351 Windsor, same way. You will have an overheating SOB. You do that. 400 small block was the same way, right? It's just dependent upon how much material and meat is still left in there after you bore it. So,
yeah, and that's also too because remember the engine's much shorter, so the fluid comes in and then comes back up, so it's not traversing 2 extra cylinders back and then 2 extra cylinders forward.
So Dakota's timeout saying my engine was running rich at idle and would not get up to temp. You can set an ice cube on the radiator and it would not have melted. Swapped carbs and now it's running right and it will get up to temp. Change your oil too, man, because you have gassed down the oil. If it's that bad of a difference, you've gassed it down. Smell it.
Yeah.
Nicholas R wants to know, was that 200 shot in the McDonald's drive-through like Dallas? Yeah, that's when you know you have a problem with nitrous oxide. Pull around, please. I can't wait.
I remember one time we were at a Jack in the Box on Poway Road, and if you know where that's at, no one knows it, but it's right next to Poway and Palmetto Road, which is like the major intersection of Poway. And we go up to the Jack in the Box. We're at the window, and the lady's handing us the food, and I'm full blown line lock 3rd gear burnout. The speedometer shows pegged, and I'm just slowly grabbing my food and getting it, and it just. I don't know how I didn't get arrested for that one. It was, and right at that time, right across the street was a police station. The cop shop was right there. Man, they got away with that.
Man, that's the 90s for you. Tom Brown, hyperprotectic usually run a tighter tolerance from piston to wall. Would you increase that clearance on a hyperprotectic nitrous setup? No. You don't want any piston slap because then that could be a possibility of breaking that piston.
I've already tried that. It just basically shattered the piston. and it didn't even, I didn't even get to hit it with nitrous. I started it up, and there was it had just a fair amount of piston rock in it. I think I measured it. It had like there was about 5 thousandths of change as far as in the piston rock. As soon as I started up, I knew the sound. It broke a skirt, and it broke it. So you got to keep it. And then I even opened up the ring gap, thinking that, because I could buy these pistons really cheap. So I was like, I got to make these work. So I even opened up the ring gap, thinking that I was breaking the pistons because the rings were hitting and then blowing up. No, that they're just brittle, and they just cannot handle that kind of cylinder pressure increase that fast. And they superheat and crack, and then they just explode, and they turn into a million pieces, like literally a million pieces.
Yeah, they shatter.
Yeah.
Dakota's timeout. The shaky needle on the vacuum gauge scared me and made me think I nicked the seats when I ported the valves, or ported the heads, or worn valve guides or something like that. But it does good now. I just had the same thing this past couple of weeks where I had somebody brought me a 68 Buick GS 400 was running poorly, and I put a vacuum gauge on it, and that sucker was jumping around from 5 to 7 inches of vacuum, and I'm like, what in the world? And my friend Stan, who's a Buick guy, he told me, he said he had a Edelbrock one time that sat for a long time, and it did something similar, and because it got like this gunk built up inside of it from the ethanol.
Yeah,
right.
It chewed it up, and yeah.
So he's like, yeah, just take it off and just put something else on there and see what happens. And I put a quarter jet on it, and it freaking came to life, and it was happy, and it's like, oh wow, okay, this is the right thing to do, is change that carburetor out. So, but I was doing the same. I had the valve covers off and the rocker arms off. I was looking for bent push rods or valves that weren't seated all the way because it maybe had tagged the valve. I thought exactly the same thing, but nope, was the carb. So Aaron Germanson says use 1971 360 pistons. Weren't they factory flat tops, right?
I believe so.
He was looking for high compression, like 10-to-1 plus thin rings.
Yeah, so that would be a later model.
Let's see. Twisted Mopar Garage says you can buy pistons that can make an external balance engine like 349, 318. 340, 318. Yeah, okay. Going from internal to external balance, generally aftermarket race cranks will do that, where it'll go from what they call neutral balance. It'll be normally your external balance, and it'll go to neutral balance. And that takes the entire assembly being balanced to work together. Mm-hmm. Because the factory rods are not set up like that at all. They're not within that tolerance for that neutral balance. But you can go from one to the other. It's just very expensive, depending upon
slugs of Mallory.
How much Mallory metal they got to put in the crank.
Yeah, and that stuff's expensive now. You can spend easily up to $500-600 on slugs.
Right, and that's what that actually is tungsten, right? Yeah. And if you know anything about what tungsten is, that's what a TIG welder uses, is tungsten. Isn't that right? Tungsten inert gas. And that's the actual electrode is tungsten. Well, when you go to weld, you have to TIG weld that Mallory metal into the crank. Is the only way to make it actually get in there and stay.
Yeah.
Right? And so now you're talking, you got to generally TIG weld it in. So you got to have a TIG welder. You're going to have to pay that guy. Plus you got $500 and virtually just a metal.
And drilling the hole. That's the biggest thing. You got to drill a hole.
The machine shop's got to do all the math and figure out where the hole's got to go. And you got a couple hours in just that. You might come out of there with like $1,000 bill and you hadn't bought a dang part yet.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing, too. That's why I would always spend the money on a good crank, because then you don't have to do that.
That's exactly the truth. That's what's cool about like a Crowder crank. Dude, yeah. I got one of them, and they were like freaking dead on.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, like, holy crap. Get your money's worth. Twisted Mopar Garage says they have a complete 360 fresh with dome pistons, 11-to-1 compression, is neutral balance. Okay. No. Okay. Danny Boyd says Carter kind of just folded up after fuel injection took over. I want to say Carter folded at like 84. I don't know if that's right. 94?
It had to have been 94.
They were in St. Louis. I remember there was they had a big auction. Had to be 94.
Big Billy Garage. I just looked at my email. I don't see it come through. Send that email again before we get offline here.
It's Slant Daily Garage at yahoo.com.
Yeah, Slant Daily Garage at yahoo.com. But I don't even see it. I was actually just clicking through my trash and my spam, and I don't see anything here from you.
Let's see. Oh, Mopar Man 1978 saying that Carter is now China.
Yeah, it looks like it by the prices. Yeah, I agree with them.
Oh, Tom Brown was wondering about the trans and the rear end gear on this upcoming Slant 6, not the Cookie Monster.
I really don't know. Once it gets here, I'm gonna pop the cover off and just kind of do an inspection on it. It's a push button transmission, so he's kind of at a disadvantage there. I was hoping that he would have, it was a later model, so that way I could put, kind of do what I did to mine. And that would be a lockup converter with a low ratio first and second, so it can get out of its own way. But he wants the 14-inch tires on it, so he's not going to run a 26 diameter tire, so that should take care of it. And I told him because of that, you're not going to be able to, freight down the freeway between 75 and 80. You'll just be able to do it between 70 and 75. It's the only difference.
Oh, well, so Danny Boyd's saying that Carter is defunct. I believe my bosses at my pizza job is son and grandson of former president of Carter Carbs. I want to say they were out of St. Louis. I know they got bought out years ago. And I want to say, well, I know for a fact Edelbrock bought the patents for the Carter carburetor. So that had to be, when did they come out with that carburetor? It had to be shortly around that period.
Yeah.
I think 94. You may be right. It may have been EFI. They put them out. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Carter didn't have a great reputation. They did well in the 50s and 60s when the AFB was the deal, right? And then you had all these other carburetors came out, but the Holly's the one that probably put the dent in them the biggest. And then they came out with the Thermoquad, and the Thermoquad was to take essentially and fix everything that was wrong with the Quadrajet, which was it's a good street carburetor, right? That's why you run around on two small little barrels and you get into it and you got the big humongous ones, right? It gives you good fuel economy and torque because of that. So they did the same thing with the Thermoquad. It was to replace the Quadrajet. The problem with the Thermoquad was that the body was made of essentially polymer plastic, and they were great for about 5 years. And then those plastic bodies would start to get so much heat distortion to them that they wouldn't seal, they'd crack and split, and then getting replacement parts was few and far between, and then troubleshooting them, it was like, it's easy to troubleshoot something when it's a symptom that you normally see all the time.
Yeah.
But let's say you take a crack and you put it in the front bowl, right? And then you can't troubleshoot that. It's not leaking any fuel, but it's got a horrendous vacuum leak, and it's like not making any sense. And then the next car that comes in's got a crack in it too, but it's in the rear of the bowl, and it acts completely different with a whole new set of symptoms, and it's not making any sense. It makes it hard for people to troubleshoot that. So what they end up doing is they end up pulling their freaking hair out, and they grab the carburetor and smash it on the ground, and they put the Quadrajet back on because it's easy to troubleshoot, right? And that's what ended up being the downfall of the Carter Thermoquad. Was that problem right there, that each one of them would have his own significant problem because of where the bodies would crack and split and wear out and pull threads, and it was a great idea. It's just the technology wasn't there to support it yet. And now everybody's running a plastic intake manifold. So, all right.
Hey, Big Belly. He's saying that Yahoo is blocking him. That's why I don't have it here. Do you mind putting up your email up here, and I'll send you an email from mine? How about that? I'll just put up your email here, and I'll just copy and paste it, and I'll send you an email.
All right, what's happening, buddy?
Yeah.
Haven't seen you in a while. Let's see, Jonathan Couch. Anybody have experience with the KB 191 pistons? They just dome versions of the KB flat tops, or are they?
I don't know the part number. I'm actually looking it up because I don't remember them. I think they were just a high compression deal. I think is what it was. It was for something that was an open chamber piston. head. I'm sorry. 430. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a dome. So yeah, it's designed for something for higher compression, and yeah, it's got 11.20 cc. So yeah, so like if you have an open compression head, open chamber head. Sorry.
Okay, Nicholas R. Speaking of oiling mods, I just recently heard about valve spring oil sprayers for heat dissipation on the Ford D3. Have you ever messed with that sort of thing? Is it a pain in the ass to set up?
Yes, it is. In fact, I'm doing that right now for the Gen 3 Hemi. I'm making oil
If your
sprayers.
engine never came with something like that, it's very complicated to make something like that. Here, okay, look at it like this. Your engine already produces, it distributes oil the way it's designed. Okay, that's 100%. So when you add something else in, that means you're taking away from somewhere else. So you need to balance the load, right? So you need to increase the capability or decrease it somewhere else, and that's what makes it hard.
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing with the Slant 6, and that's the reason why I open up the flow, is that the stock Chrysler Slant 6 oiling system is perfect for what that engine is intended for. Me running it down the freeway for 24 hours and doing in 1,800 miles at 2,700 RPM, it was never designed for that. And especially with the high camshaft, whenever you put an aftermarket cam in it, you're getting higher lifts, higher spring pressures. You're going to build a lot more heat, and that's the reason why I do that is basically to dissipate heat. And in my Gen 3 Hemi, I'm putting in oil sprayers in it currently right now, so that way it will spray onto the exhaust spring. So that way it does cool it for that exact reason. So yeah, it is a pain in the ass because you got to tap in somewhere, plummet into the valve cover, and then put your 40 thousandths holes down there
nozzles,
so that would so it sprays down.
Yeah. Huh. So 38 POS Racing says, I have a 454 with high-pre pistons. Has a light knock at 1800 and above. Ground out number 8, and it starts at 2300. Cracked piston likely? No, they, like we said before, those pistons like to shatter.
Yes.
Right?
Sometimes though you'll break a skirt. The skirt will come right off. If it's
That'll make them knock.
That'll make it knock, but you can just do that with a pressure test, compression test. You can just do a compression test on that when it's cold, and you'll know if that's the problem. Because it'll be low. That's how I found mine when I broke the skirt.
That one cylinder was low?
Way low. Yeah, it was like normally everything else was like 170, 175, and I think this one was like 140.
Anything outside that 10%, huh?
Yeah. It was significant, and it was noticeable. Big time.
Well, Ari, you just showed up and now you're out of here. Have fun, man. Good luck.
Yeah.
And I'm behind. I'm 10 minutes behind. He's already long gone.
Oh. I don't even know where you're at on here. So
Jonathan Couchy was saying it had to be 84 that Carter went away because Chrysler switched to the Quadrajet in 85.
Yes, it was 84, 85. I Googled it while we were talking. So yes.
Oh, was it? 84? Yeah. Okay.
84, 85.
Let's see. Carter sold more OEM carbs than aftermarket, and Holly was king of aftermarket. Oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. Because it's really simplistic and it doesn't leak. There's really no gaskets below the fuel line, so it rarely has any problems.
That's just the AFB though, right?
Yes,
that
Thermoquad
was a different animal. I don't think it hurt them in relation to how many carburetors they sold. It's just it gave that Thermoquad a bad name. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the cool thing about that Thermoquad was some of them were 1,000 CFM, right? You could literally go get 1,000 CFM Thermoquad.
I had two of them.
You have one right now?
No. I had two of them before I moved here, and I'm just like, what am I going to do with these things? So I basically gave them away to one of my friends. But yeah, they were off of a motorhome, I believe, is what they were, 1,000 CFM.
I was thinking about using one on my because they're vacuum secondary. So even if it's 1,000 CFM capable, if your engine only needs 911, it's going to give it 911 CFM.
Yeah.
That's all it needs until it balances those air blades, and that's where it stops. It just won't go any further. I thought about using one on my Super Stock because I wanted big CFM. Let's see. Dust Devil says, yes, it was in St. Louis. So Carter was in St. Louis. He used to drive by the old plant every day.
Yep.
Jonathan Couchy says, also, I believe the quadrujets on the Dodge trucks were 850 CFM. No, they only have two sizes as far as I know, 750 and 800 CFM. And most everything became an 800 after like 1975. Except the trucks. The trucks, some of them were still 750s. Let's see, James and James show. Big James is in the house. Just showed up the last few minutes, man. We only got 6 minutes left.
Really? Is it only 6 minutes? No way.
Yeah, it's flown. This one's flown by.
Wow.
Yeah, but I would definitely 38 POS racing. I would definitely do it like a compression test. It's you probably you could have knocked that skirt off of there, and then that's all that it is, and it won't take much to shatter that piston. So it may be smart just to see if that's the case, and then pull her out. And
just do it cold because those hybrid technics are really tight tolerances. So you got to do it cold so that way you'll see it.
Let's see.
Colin. Yeah, go the one right below.
Colin Tebow says, the springs I took off my 318 were white after soaking them in crud cutter. Thanks, Mrs. P. The white came off, and now there's a light blue on the top and bottom. How can I identify them?
Oh, yeah. That crud cutter works awesome, man. I'm telling you, I use that. I don't use any harsh chemicals anymore. I use the crud cutter, and it works awesome.
Really? Does it have to be hot, or is it mixed with water or anything like that?
Just you can put water in it. Yeah, you can put water in it, but I just use spray, and I just get it at Home Depot, and it's cheap. And I use mineral spirits or acetone in containers like our old pickle containers. I shake them up, and that's how I've been cleaning all my parts. No more brake cleaner, you know.
Yeah, well, that's what I do. See, I have a sonic cleaner.
Yeah, I got one of those too.
So I take the pickle jar and I throw my parts in there. And I put acetone in it, and then I set it in water in that sonic cleaner, and it goes through that jar like it's not even there, right? And it cleans it with acetone on the inside of that jar. Yeah, but on the outside, it's just hot water.
Yeah.
And it does a great job, and I don't have to clean that stupid thing up.
Yeah, no, and I bought one of those too, so I could drop a whole carburetor in it. I put a whole carburetor in it, and I was just like, this is a terrible mess. Because I had to clean it up. As far as
cleaning out the machine.
Yeah, cleaning out the machine. So I've been putting them in pickle jars, and I just drop them in, mineral spirits or acetone, and just put them right in the machine and just let them go. And
I buy the acetone in like the gallon can over at Lowe's, and I use that. I try to buy everything in bulk because it's considerably cheaper. But
way cheaper.
Can you get the crud cutter in like
gallons?
Can you get in a gallon?
Yeah,
and it comes without a sprayer, right?
Without a sprayer. And so then I just go and buy the spray cans for it, and I just pour it into it.
Well, I was going to put it in my parts cleaner, that sonic cleaner.
Oh, you could do that too. I've done that.
Do you think I could cut it with water, and it would probably be safe for aluminum?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's fine. It's not going to hurt it. It's safe on everything. I use the crud cutter. You know how I clean this house? Crud cutter and then Windex. That's it. That's all I use. No, all that other stuff, all the Tilex, all that other crap went right in the trash.
Here's some interesting news. Colleen says they make Crud Cutter Pro too, $58 for 5 gallons.
Wow.
There you go. That's $11 a gallon about. Well, yeah.
But you don't need it. I'm telling you, the regular Crud is just fine. I've cleaned whole engines on that.
Well, we'll see. I'm going to have to clean this 215 aluminum engine that I'm going to be putting together for a guy named Roger. I haven't got to it yet. I got everything else dropped on me all at one time. Let's see. Okay, Michael Schmidt says, when ceramic coating coating short cast iron headers, is it normal to do the inside and the outside of the cast iron header, or do they just do the outside? I'm thinking he's talking exhaust manifolds, right?
Yes. The company that does it here is Rick's Powder Coating. They do the inside and the out for the thermal coating, so that way it doesn't trap it inside. You're keeping the heat in the exhaust, so that way it doesn't heat soak. That was his explanation to me. Now you can do it either way. So if you just do the outside, it just keeps it good. But if you do the inside and the outside, because exhaust rusts from the inside out, not the other way around. So I would do it inside and out. And that way you keep all the heat inside the exhaust pipe itself.
So Colleen said we never answered her question. You didn't send a super chat.
Which question was that? We did the...
No. I know which one she's talking about.
Oh.
How can I identify the springs?
Oh.
The light blue is probably just the factory. Isn't the Mopar color, that light blue?
Yeah, it is. But, I mean, how are you going to...
You can't identify the spring. You actually need to measure it on a spring checker to identify that spring.
Yeah. Get your installed height on the valve.
Oh, I tell you what you can do. Okay, if you got a caliper there, measure the diameter of the wire, right? And then you measure how many coils are on it. Don't use your caliper to do that. You can actually measure the freestanding height. That's going to help you too. But if they're worn, if they're used, who knows what it's going to be.
That's why I use a spring checker, because what you're going to tell her will work if it's new and not been heat cycled 100 times, because the temper is going to go way down. So that's why you got to use a spring checker, because I already know what you're going to say, because I've done the same thing, because you can get the math for it and just figure it out.
Okay, so Dakota's saying that he painted his headers with Eastwood internal high temp paint. I'll tell you a trick that it used to be the mainstay, the hot rodder mainstay. Being a hot rodder is all about how to be a cheap ass while not being a cheap ass, right? My header and exhaust manifold coating go-to is go to Walmart, go to the paint rack, you find grill paint, right?
For barbecue grill paint.
Barbecue grill paint. That shit will not burn off.
It works beautiful. Yeah. And it doesn't make a big smoky mess. It does a little bit, but not as bad as like VHT.
Yeah, VHT, that's like you think your car's on fire when you see that the first time.
Yeah.
But you'll get a little bit of smoke, but that stuff lasts a long time, and it's so cheap compared to, like, if you go get the VHT paint, I want to say it's probably $12 a can, right?
More than that. It's like $20 now.
Is it now?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
Well, okay. You go get the grill paint. It's probably like $4 a can, and it's good till 2,500 degrees or something stupid.
Yeah, you'll never get near it. If you burn that off, you got problems. You got other problems.
Yeah. Make sure your vacuum advance isn't hooked up to straight ported vacuum and you're running lean, right?
Yeah, right.
So, all right. Hey, it's 2 hours already, so
wow,
we got to go. We're out of here. I don't know if Shane took his gummies disco round, but he's probably going to be falling asleep here soon. But
I ate them right at 8 o'clock, like I was saying. So
oh, well, perfect. So then you'll be falling asleep right after this. So I want to thank everybody that was here. Thanks for coming out. Also, thanks D150 for that freaking amazing $100 super chat.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I own Shane lunch, and it's on you, right?
Yeah, right.
And I promise he's gonna get it. So
you know what? Save it for the No Name Nationals. How about that? Take my share and let's just put it towards a food pot. How about that? Or take my share. Yeah, let's put it towards a food pot, like the first night, like we're there, because I'm gonna get there Wednesday night, and then maybe we'll just make a big buffet. How about that?
Well, you know what? I tell you what. Remember what we normally do is that we have that community. Yeah. Well, we did that community barbecue, right?
Let's put it towards that.
Yeah, and just buy some food to cook on the grill and just essentially hand them out.
Yeah, that's cheap, and I'll feed a bunch of people. Perfect. Let's do that.
Oh, hey, here's this one before we're out of here. World of Wood Chip said, I painted my headers with Rust-Oleum stove paint, baked on in the oven. Holding up great so far. Perfect. I've never tried that, but I'm going to have to try it now.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, we're out of here. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.
Yep. Same bat time, same bat channel on the Fall Guy.
And nobody got the Fall Guy one, and it's I don't know why they didn't put the truck in the actual factory or in the OEM promo or whatever you want to call it.
Like when it's jumping, and that was like I wanted to see that the whole time.
Iconic picture.
Perfect.
But next week we'll be back with some Hardcastle and McCormick, or I don't know what was the one that had the screaming Mimi, Simon and Simon.
Simon, right?
But we'll see you guys next week.
All right, guys.
We're out of here.